Did Republicans call 1-800-DIAL-A-SPINE? With Donald Trump pushing a slush fund that could hand out six-figure payouts to the very people who sent lawmakers into hiding and literally running for their lives on January 6, 2021, Republicans are on the verge of saying something they haven't said to Donald Trump much in the last 10 years. No, or niet. Here's just some of the reaction on Capitol Hill. Listen to outgoing Senator Thom Tillis.
I think it's stupid on stilts.
Why?
Because it will invariably put us in a position where your taxpayer dollars and my taxpayer dollars could potentially compensate someone who assaulted a police officer, admitted their guilt, got convicted, got pardoned, and now we're going to pay them for that? That's absurd. The American people are going to reject this out of hand.
Wow. Now do the ballroom and the arch. That was Thom Tillis. Here's Wisconsin Senator Ron Johnson. He called the timing of the announcement of the fund a, quote, galactic blunder. The New York Times is reporting this about what happened behind closed doors when acting Attorney General Todd Blanche met with Senate Republicans on Thursday to defend this political stink bomb. Quote, what unfolded in an ornate room just off the Senate floor Thursday morning was a 2-hour blow-up in which dozens of Republican senators vented their anger and concern about the president's fund at Blanche. They questioned its legal basis, whom it would pay, and how the process would work. And they made it clear they wanted no part of the plan. Former Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell said this, quote, so the nation's top law enforcement official is asking for a slush fund to pay people who assault cops. Utterly stupid, morally wrong, take your pick, end quote. I mean, this isn't the first, quote, utterly stupid or morally wrong decision Mitch McConnell has had to make with regards to Donald Trump. Trump went down the escalators at Trump Tower 11 years ago. At any point in those 11 years, McConnell might have stood up to him. We know he privately described Donald Trump as a, quote, despicable person. But McConnell and the rest of the Republican Party wouldn't be here now if they'd spoken up before this news cycle, with Donald Trump now literally asking them to sign off on and commit money to paying out the people who threatened to kill all of them and Mike Pence on January 6th. If they had decided any other moment before this week to hold him accountable for January 6th and voted to impeach and convict him during his trial in the Senate, back when Mitch McConnell said this.
There's no question, none, that President Trump is practically and morally responsible for provoking the events of the day. No question about it.
I want to bring in Washington correspondent for the Los Angeles Times, Ben Weider, and joining me at the table, Paul Rieckhoff. He's the host of the Independent Americans podcast. He is the founder and CEO of Independent Veterans of America. Michael Feinberg's still here. Ben, what do you think?
I mean, I think, I think if we're thinking about why this moment, why now, I mean, certainly, I don't think you can find very many people outside of, President Trump and Todd Blanche who are defending this IRS slush fund. But, the politics are important to consider. On the one hand, we've seen in recent weeks the tremendous power that Donald Trump still wields in Republican primaries. Senator Bill Cassidy, Representative Tom Massey, both ousted after bitter primary fights in which Trump was adamantly opposed to them. But we also know that the party is extremely worried about their prospects in November. The backdrop is we have a very unpopular war in Iran. We have the economic impact of that. And then this IRS slush fund is a very, very hard thing to defend to voters. How do you defend to voters that your taxpayer money should go to someone who is convicted of crimes, who in some of the cases of some of these January 6th protesters have subsequently convicted of other crimes after being pardoned? It's a very, very hard sell. And I think, the political calculus and the real challenges that Trump's decisions, which seem from a political perspective to be driven more in many cases by vengeance than any real grand political strategy, are causing some Republicans to say, wait a second, maybe it's time for us to actually step up and oppose something. Yeah,
I mean, Paul Rieckhoff, I think the problem is that there's a political calculation at all. It should just be WTF, this is wrong. Next request. Because the thing about Trump is, and this has always boggled my mind about the fear that Republicans have, he'll move on and ask for something else next week. I mean, this is like he doesn't stay mad. He just asks for something else ludicrous. And here he is. I mean, the thing with the fund, too, is that he doesn't think there's anything wrong with it. He thinks it's too small. Listen.
You know, it was the most violent thing I've ever seen in politics, what they did. And yet if I say, oh, let's look at this one or that one, they say weaponization, weaponization. What they did in terms of weaponization will never be allowed to happen in this country again. So we think that those people, we think that anybody involved in that process should partake. And you're talking about peanuts compared to the value. It destroyed the lives of many, many people.
So it was the most violent thing. I think he's talking about the prosecutions of him. I played the sound of Mitch McConnell basically referring him for criminal prosecution. That's essentially a criminal referral. If he'd done that on paper, it would have been asking the Department of Justice to investigate him. Describes him as practically and morally responsible for the violence on January 6th.
So it's Memorial Day weekend, where we honor the integrity, the sacrifice, the honor of generations of Americans who stepped forward. And a couple days before that, he wants to provide compensation, and we shouldn't even call it compensation, a payout for people who violently attacked the government, domestic terrorists who showed the opposite of honor, integrity, and courage. It's despicable. It's overwhelmingly unpopular. It's about time Republicans stepped up and drew a line, and hopefully that'll give them momentum on things like Iran and Cuba. But I also think there's another part of this. The more desperate he becomes, the more dangerous he becomes. And I don't think this is accidental. I think this is strategic. I think he wants to incentivize people to stand up and oppose the government, to attack the government sites, the elections. It'll be a great focal point coming up in just a couple weeks. And I've called it Plan C. Plan A, if he wants to disrupt the elections, is the military, and they're likely to say no. Plan B would be ICE. Well, we don't know where that's going to go. This is Plan C. This is the backup plan. This is a green light to every insurrectionist and everyone who wants to stand with Trump and against the evil forces that he conspires. This gives them a green light to do bad things and know that you will be pardoned and you will even get paid for it. So I think we have to be really mindful of the fact that he knows that the midterms are a circuit breaker. He knows they will hold him accountable. And things like this are not accidental. They're quite intentional. Even if they fail, the signal he's sending with it is very important.
Well, let me just press you on that, because people have said this for a couple of days, and I just want to put out some reporting from NPR because they have heard this, right? Mm-hmm. So the convicted insurrectionist who was pardoned and then went on to molest children and also be charged, convicted, and sentenced to life in prison told his child victim of molestation to keep quiet about being molested because he was coming into a lot of money. Restitution from Donald Trump for January 6th. And so I guess instead of debating whether or not that is the plan, that is what the insurrectionists have heard.
Right. I mean, it's okay. The president wants you on his side. The president considers you a victim. And it kind of reminds me of, I don't know, maybe like when Saddam Hussein let everybody out of prison because they would disrupt things right before he knew the Americans were going to attack. And this is what you do. You pick the worst of the worst, the people who are the most desperate, the people who are most despised, and you give them a green light to do bad things. And he's been doing that throughout every time he's been in office since 11 years ago when he came down that escalator. And I think it's really, really important that we think strategically about how to combat that, not just dismiss it as a whim of something that Trump does, and also recognize the Republicans have actually stopped him on something. That's really, really important. They haven't stopped him on Iran. They didn't stop him on Venezuela. And now this is
so lame that the bar is so low.
But now we need them to potentially stop him on Cuba because it is Memorial Day weekend, and they want to make more veterans. They want to put more people in Arlington, and they're already focused on Cuba. There's an aircraft carrier down there. They're sending all the messaging, and they didn't stop him on Iran. They didn't stop him on Venezuela, and hopefully they can have a war powers vote on Cuba before he actually hits Cuba. That would be nice.